Radio 1 FM 90.
Brought to you by Housing Finance Bank, a financial institution regulated by Bank of Uganda. Housing Finance Bank, we make it easy.
Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Spectrum, live on Radio 1 FM 90. We are also coming to you live on our website, which is www.radio1fm90.com. On that website, you click on the icon with the word Listen Live. Radio 1 is also live on the different radio listening apps, TuneIn, AfroMobile, your TV channel, Radio Garden, and Stream Africa. Those can be obtained from the Google stores with your smartphone. You download any of those, look for Radio 1 FM 90, and as long as you have an internet connection, you'll be able to listen to us. There's also the option of DSTV. We are on DSTV. Our audio channel there is 897. Now, there are two ways to contribute to this discussion. One of the ways is actually to send us a message on the WhatsApp line, which is 0703 090 090. The other option is actually to call in. Time allowing, I'll open the phone lines for you to do so. Tomorrow is Budget Speech Day, and today we will be reflecting on this budget, asking what are the issues that stand out ahead of the speech tomorrow. Now, we know Parliament passed a 72.1 trillion shilling national budget, which was increased from 58 trillion. Looking at the figures there, government also increased the amount of money that it had planned to borrow from the external market from 8.9 trillion to 10.9 trillion shillings. They also plan to borrow from the local market 28.7 trillion shillings. That will mean they will be borrowing from the commercial banks which are here. The revision of these figures, the State Minister told Parliament, that is Henry Musasi, that President Yoweri Museveni had authorized the revision of these budget figures, which came through Corrigenda. And from the figures, the current budget will now be 13.5 trillion shillings from 11.486 trillion shillings. And the development budget is also expected to be 13.7 trillion shillings, up from 15.5 trillion shillings. One of the biggest allocations is debt servicing, which will be 34 trillion shillings, which will be spent next financial year on servicing the debt. We know the tax measures that Parliament did pass to support this national budget. It includes levy on petrol, which was increased by 100 shillings. We also saw a levy of 500 shillings being imposed on 50 kilograms of lime, adhesive, and grout, and a rate of 50 shillings fixed on per litre of mineral water, among others. So different stakeholders have been reacting to this budget ahead of the reading, but tomorrow we'll be keenly following and have a discussion here about what will be said. So today we want to look at this budget. What are the key issues that we need to look out as we prepare even to listen to the speech, which will be delivered by the President through the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. I have two guests in studio. Mr. Patrick Kichoncho Katabazi, economist and policy analyst at the Center for Budget and Tax Policy. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Katabazi.
Yes, good evening, Kenneth, and good evening to our listeners.
Also in studio, Ms. Jen Nalunga, Executive Director at Siatini, Uganda. One of the members of the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group. They made the analysis which was communicated to the country on Sunday. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, Kenneth, and thank you so much for inviting me, and good evening, our listeners.
And I hope you are all prepared for the budget speech tomorrow.
Yeah, even if we are not prepared, it has to be read.
It has to be read.
And we'll listen.
And we will have to listen. Yeah. Let's begin basically by looking at the budget speech these days and what used to happen in the past. Some people have been actually saying that somehow it seems the population does not follow so much what happens with the budget speech these days compared to what used to happen in the past. Let's speak from your experience, Ms. Jen Nalunga. Growing up at that time when the budget used to be read and today, and is there so much difference looking at what happens?
There is. When I was growing up in the villages, people used to anticipate to be happy that the budget is going to be read. For me, I think it was basically mainly because of coffee, cotton, tea, tobacco, because they used to increase the price of those products. And it was that anticipation that coffee prices are going to go up. And I think why maybe we need also, maybe later we'll look at how we're organizing our production and marketing. Because what government used to do is to be able to keep some, if the prices of those products would go up, like coffee on the international market, they keep some money. And if prices go down, they ensure that the prices are stabilized. So for me, I think that was one of the issues. But today, people are also interested. It's just that maybe there's what they call the open budget survey. It came up with a very interesting figure that it's only about 20% of Ugandans who follow the budget. Others are not interested. But we need to find out why are people not interested. Maybe it's because also the budget doesn't talk to their challenges. There is some level of apathy where people say they are eating their money. What can they do? There is not going to be any schools, any change, maybe in hospitals, maybe in roads, So I think it's important that we analyze that. Why are Ugandans not interested? Because that's the social contract between government and its citizens. We need to look at that, and it's the foundation of democracy, where citizens demand, where is the money coming from, where is it going to go. That's the foundation of democracy, and I think we need to address that.
Patrick, what's your analysis on that? The enthusiasm that used to be around for the national budget and what has happened now, as presented by Ms. Nalunga.
Yes, so far as I can recall, the budget speech used to be delivered by the president, and Obote too, the president, was the one delivering the speech as the Minister of Finance. And also in the early years of Museveni's government, the president himself would read the speech. At that time, you would find many people, and especially teachers, because there would not be very many people who had radios. So you would find one radio set in the teachers' staff room and listening, because then the president would be talking about salary increment. It would happen in that speech. Then they would also set prices for all the commodities. So people would be excited and anxious to know how the price regime is going to look like and how their salaries will possibly also turn out to be. And in that case then, it created a sense of anxiety, and everybody would be looking forward to hearing what they would say in the budget speech. Of course, along the way, that changed. So we had the Minister of Finance, I think Mayanja Nkanji and Gerard Sendaur at that time, coming on as Ministers of Finance to read the budget. And of course, then part of also the excitement was that you're reading the budget and people are anxious to know what is coming in the next financial year. The budget will be presented, then the budget speech, a budget speech would be delivered before the budget would be presented. So a budget speech would be in June, the budget would be presented somewhere in September, October. And of course then on 1st of July, government would run on vote on account, pending approval of the budget. So with the coming into force of the Public Finance Management Act of 2015, the whole cycle of the budget changes. And now we first pass the budget by 30th of May, and then have the budget speech running between the 14th and 15th, depending on which day it falls, being a constitutional provision and also an East African-wide practice. So now, whereas I think that there are some people who are very interested in listening to the budget speech, but I don't think that the enthusiasm is as big as it was many years ago. But I also want again to make this comment that it would be very important to listen to the budget speech, because when Parliament passes this budget, there are so many things that remain unknown. I want to give an example. all of us, I mean, most of us, including myself, has said that the budget process we have witnessed in the just concluded processes has been a very shambolic exercise. We will have figures flying all over the place from 52, 54, 58, and 72 trillion. Now, people are not aware of what is entailing the 72 trillion. We can talk about it on the radio and other analysts can say so, but now we anticipate, or it would be our expectation, that when they are reading the budget, the Minister of Finance and the President should tell us how they intend to implement the 72 trillion budget. To also share some nitty-gritties of information of what investment areas are contained in this budget. And that's why it becomes very important for us to be keen on what they are saying, because some of the processes that happen in Parliament, beyond what civil society organizations can present, some of the things that actually happen are usually outside the eye of an ordinary citizen. And a budget day is a day of receiving information of what has been happening and what we should expect in the coming financial year.
All right. Now, let's try to dig deeper. And I'll come to you, Ms. Jane Nalunga. When you look at this budget process, like Mr. Katabazi has suggested, what are some of the things that we need actually to reflect on? Because the most important thing for Ugandans, and even the government itself, is for this budget to actually work. When you sit down as civil society and do your analysis, compared to what we saw with the other budget processes, what are you saying?
Thank you, Kenneth. Maybe when we talk about the budget process, I also think it's important for Ugandans to have a say of how, because sometimes we concentrate a lot on dividing up the cake. Where is the cake? Who is taking what slice? But we should also be looking at how are we mobilizing the resources, who is paying the taxes and who is not paying, and the implication of that. For me, I think that's also very critical, that Ugandans should have a say in that. And then Ugandans should also have a say on where the money is going. Where should it go? You said work, that the budget should work. And we need to understand and be able to agree as Ugandans, when we say this budget has worked, how should it look like? And I think we need to go back to the drivers, and Mr. Gobi, the PSST raised this issue. What are the drivers of our economy? Because today, the biggest challenge we have, when you look at the 72 trillion budget, and you said it, 72 trillion, 38, 34, 34
trillion.
Interest and debt repayment. So we are looking at a budget of 38 trillion. So when we are talking about a budget which works, or which is going to work, it means that we need to look at how we use the 38 trillion to be able to grow the economy, to be able to ensure that government receives some resources to repay the loan and to provide services. And that's why we are talking about the debt trap. We need to be able to see how we get out of the debt trap. Because you see, when you look at what you read out, where we are going to get the funding, even from commercial banks, that means higher interest rate and a higher debt, higher interest repayments. This budget next year is automatically going to go up. So when we talk about a budget which is going to work, we need to think very, very critically and reflect very critically how we are going to use the 38 trillion. And that means there are things which should have changed in Uganda. How we are spending, where we are spending that money, and where we should be spending that money. I will just give you an example. I know, Mr. Katabazi, we talk about the misuse of the resources. I want just to look at the drivers of an economy. and an economy like Uganda is agriculture and industrialization.
You are trying to determine where we should put the 38
The
trillion that
38
will remain
trillion,
with.
so that we can be able to, the return on investment, recoup resources which can service the loan, but be able also to generate some resources for government to provide services. So, and I was talking about the drivers for Uganda's economy. We need to be able to see what are the drivers of our economy.
One, you say it's agriculture.
And not agriculture alone. Because the moment you leave agriculture on its own, agriculture will die and people will remain in poverty. Because if you tell people to produce more pineapples, what's happening today? You tell them produce more pineapples, what will happen? Because even you can, I know you open your boot and you dump 10 pineapples. You can't dump 20 pineapples in your car. So what will happen to that person who is growing the pineapples? So that's why agriculture has to go with industrialization and value addition. The two have to go together. But when you look at the budget, the budget for agro-industrialization has been cut. It was 1.9 last year. It's 1.6 trillion. And government is just providing some of that resource, not all of it. And we are expecting other resources from outside. And this is the key sector which can get us out of poverty. So it's agro-industrialization, tourism, and mineral development. Those are the drivers. I'm not saying the human capital expenditure is a
Not
given.
important.
No, my dear. It's a given. We have to have, because the biggest investment any country can have is its people.
Human resource.
Education and health. Those are a given.
A must.
But it's a must.
They should be the first calls on the budget.
Exactly. You know, uneducated people are very expensive. You know, illiteracy is very expensive, and our government should know that.
Okay.
Put money, we shouldn't be at this level. You know, people having jiggers, people studying under trees. What kind of economy are we running?
All right.
What kind of country?
All right. Let's hear from Mr. Katabazi. Do you think this budget will work, looking at the figures, the allocations, and the things that stand out, including the 34 trillion that is going to be spent on debt servicing? Ms. Nalunga suggests we will only be left with 38 trillion, and looking at the way the budget has been shared out, we are seeing development budget will be 13 trillion, and it has increased to shillings 15 trillion from 13 trillion, and we are seeing recurrent budget from 13 trillion from 11 trillion to 13 trillion.
Now, it depends on who you are asking whether the budget is going to work or
I'm
not.
asking you now as
You have asked
somebody
me.
who has followed closely.
I think the budget will work in some aspects, but will terribly fail in some. And this is why I say so. Under our public finance management laws and practices, is that government invests a lot of money in the process of coming out with plans and the associated budget. These processes start as early as at the beginning of the financial year. From that point, we have budget consultative workshops that happen. Then that culminates into the national budget framework papers for different sectors. Then it goes up to the national budget framework paper that is aggregated for all the programs now, and it is taken to Parliament for approval. Now, the document that was taken to Parliament for approval, you know what it was.
No, I don't know.
If then that is approved, then the budget is supposed to be derived from the National Budget Framework paper, then going upwards to Budget Estimates and Appropriation Act, and coming up with the national budget. And now what is coming through, which we have talked about for quite some time, is that Parliament has reached the level of absorbing the work of executive. The core work of executive is to plan the budget. Parliament is supposed to add in the voice of the people. And by doing so, Parliament should become a platform where government then negotiates with Parliament on behalf of the people. But what they have been doing is to arbitrarily cut money from here to there. Remember some of the things, and I'm not saying that the executive is 100% perfect, but when you arbitrarily and unilaterally cut money from one sector to the other, or to any other expenditure item, yet that budget was built on key fundamentals, then you risk having a budget that becomes very difficult to implement. I want to give you an example. What we have been seeing historically is that the budgets we have been running as a country have been incremental in nature. We have not been having very significant cuts on the key sectors that are responsible for socio-economic, for the message, or the president's message of socio-economic transformation. And my colleague Jen has identified some. I'm also going to highlight some, especially on the social sector side, and one of the subjects that I like so much, social protection, because of its ability to bridge the gap between the poor and the rich, and also ensure fairness and equality. On the budget of SAGE, which was 121 billion from the last year's budget, and remember now the enrollments are going on and numbers are going up, this budget has been reduced by 20 billion, and it is now 100. On the money that is going for the Uganda Women Intervention Program and the Youth Livelihood Program, the budget is at 27 billion. On the disability grant, the budget was 15 billion. Now, it is only 8. You are going to hear the noise from the person with disabilities. The enterprise fund for older persons, which was in the previous budget at 5, now it is at 3. I can go on. There is Green Jobs Enterprises, there's Juakari. All these have been slashed.
So the budget has gone up, basically.
Yes, the budget has gone up. But what is so surprising is that on the critical sectors, in fact, the budget has been cut. And it's so sad that some of the cuts have actually been also arbitrary. Not that these are making of government, but also upwards on those processes of budget approval. And that is why, for me, I think that the executive has a very big responsibility of correcting these errors. If, in fact, we have been complaining about supplementary budgets, I think this, for me, the time that if the president goes ahead and approves the Appropriation Act, this should be the time to actually then look at a corrective supplementary budget to address some of the shortfalls that are happening in the critical sectors.
But
in agriculture,
the same people are opposed to supplementary budget.
Yes, I am. But here we are confronted with the parliament that has grown wings, that the executive has failed to tame, and we are confronted with a crisis where parliament cuts budgets, including for treasury operations, which makes it extremely difficult for government to meet its debt obligations. Where have you seen that happening in any other country? It is only happening in Uganda. Parliament is holding executive at ransom, and it is not giving the Now, tell me, you are talking about civil society involvement. You have a budget of 58 trillion. It is introduced at 5 in the evening. The budget is approved late in the night at 10, 11 the same day. And you are adding, how much are you adding to the equation? Over 14 trillion. Where did we put the voice in that whole arrangement?
All right.
Where were the citizens? So it is very important that if we are to talk about prudent public finance management, all the stakeholders be given time. And in any case, by the way, like in this particular budget, the budget was passed when we had more than 10 days left. Where would they be hurrying?
All right.
And I think for me, this is where, as Ugandans, we need to come together and we demand that critical sectors of this economy that are supposed to drive growth, that are supposed to fit into the agenda of the socio-economic government, must be supported.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. We're going to go for a break. When we return, we'll be looking at that issue that Mr. Katavazi actually emphasized on, the issue of prudency, using the resources in a prudent manner. Are we likely to do that? Can we actually do that? That, of course, ushers in the discussion around corruption and budget performance. Now, stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90, but keep your comments coming. Our WhatsApp line is 0703 090 and 090. 0703 090 090. Spectrum continues after this break.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Well, thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum. Today we are looking at the budget, national budget. We already know that it was passed by Parliament, and tomorrow there will be a speech explaining in detail what these figures actually mean for this country. But ahead of that, we're trying to make sense of the budgeting process, the figures therein, and also probably looking at the lessons we need to take into account as even we begin for the budgeting for the 2025-2026 national budget, with the budget cycle expected to begin in September this very year. Let me come to you, Mr. Jane Nalunga. On these issues of prudency, using the money that we have properly, you talked about the 38 trillion that we will be having at our disposal. And, of course, there's a debate about how resources are actually used in this country. We have heard about issues called budgeting for corruption. We have had the president complaining about a racket between the Minister of Finance, Parliament, and even accounting officers. Certain things seem not to add up when it comes to issues of prudence. So what kind of advice would you give on this issue? How do we deal with it to ensure that the budget works?
Thank you so much, Kenneth. It is true that there are a number of things which are really are not adding up. We are here talking about almost half of our budget going to debt servicing, but we still have a very huge parliament, very huge. And for me, I think when you look at what's going on in parliament, or when you look at all these people, the members of parliament who are stealing money, changing whatever, and maybe those are people who have never spoken. Because I was looking at the name of those members of parliament. I even didn't know them. I have never heard of them debating. They are busy stealing money. So what's that parliament doing there, that huge parliament? As civil society, we have been raising this issue. You know, when somebody is redundant, that's when they start doing such things. So when we talk about prudent use of resources, we need to look at what do we need as a country and what do we want. Like the saying goes, you have to cut your coat according to the clothes we have. So we need to look at what are those things which we can leave. Because today, Kenneth, I want to tell you, you go to the villages, like I said, there is a lot of apathy. People are alienated from government. People hear money being tossed up and down, 50 billion, 1 billion. That one has taken 50 billion. Yet somebody is talking about kasukari. You know, that's how far the inequality has gone on in this country. There are people who are destitute, very poor, and there are people who are just throwing money all over the place. So it's important that we look at what are those things which we don't need and we put them aside. Parliament, we don't need 500 members of parliament. And I think we need around 50. They can do the job very well. So, and we put resources where they are supposed to be.
How do you do that?
Do that?
Yeah. What formula would you recommend to actually reduce the number the way you're suggesting?
Look at that parliament. We have people who are representing the old people, who are representing the army. They are representing the people with a disability. They are representing the women. They are representing. We are going to reach a stage where each village has a member of parliament. It's a matter of saying we go back to the old districts, Mubende district, Masaka, we can be able to do it. The whole issue is to say that things have to change. And we need to reach that level to say enough is enough. Let us go back on the drawing board. There are things which we need to change.
So basically, you're talking about the cost of public administration.
The cost. And the RDCs, the assistant RDCs, we are the most governed country in the entire Africa, in the entire world, where there was a study which was done that for
the layers of governance.
Too many. We are very governed, you know. So we need to rethink that when we are talking about the prudent use of resources. Another issue is the issue of debt management. It's like we are always going on a borrowing spree. The minister was in Korea. He just went for a meeting, brought another loan. Was it $500 million? And I was thinking, you go to Korea, I would have expected, okay, you borrow, but let us see that maybe you have done a deal that maybe you want to export more coffee to you, want to do this. Nothing. It's more debt. So we are going on a debt spree, and when you look at the Auditor General's report, the last one, there are monies, loans which we acquired, which we are not using because we are not ready to use them.
From the reports we have heard that some people are actually using that money. You may not be using it, but there are some people who are using that money.
But as government is paying a commitment fee on that money. There is like penalties. So maybe somebody is putting it on their account to generate more money. That's also corruption. But at the end of the day, government is borrowing money which is not which we are not utilizing as a country.
Right, Mr. Katabaza, as a policy analyst, you look at this issue of the cost of public administration. Ms. Jane Nalunga raises two issues: the issue of debt, but also the issue of public administration. People complaining that the layers of governance are too many. That we can cut it down. Do you see that actually happening? Government has tried with the issue of the government agencies, mergers and rationalization, the rationalization process that we had. But can we actually deal with the issues of the public administration? Is it likely to happen, looking at how things are done now?
No, it's not likely to happen. And you see the merger that we had hopes in collapsed once it reached Parliament, because Parliament is the center of interest. And you saw members of Parliament confessing by themselves one by one, saying that some members of Parliament were compromised in order to save certain agencies and also let go others. So in essence, if the intention is to merge UNRA and works, merge NADS and agriculture, I'm talking about the big ones, and it does not happen, then this library thing of a few people and these small things that they are adding together, in my view, it remains symbolic and does not solve any problem. And look, using the rationalization and merge of government agencies as an example, it is unlikely in the short run that we shall see the cost of public administration actually coming down. Instead, it is projected to increase, and that is where the biggest worry is, because we are already in a situation where you have so many people that are being hired for roles that are more or less like similar, but also more than necessary, and with very limited amount of money in terms of non-wage to facilitate them to do the work. So you have a huge budget for wages and a smaller budget for non-wage. And then, of course, more importantly, you have a limiting budget for development. So meaning that most of the money that you're spending in the economy is employing people. Yes, that is correct. They will pay taxes, they will do that. But if you're like other countries who borrow, for example, for projects, most of them actually base their calculations on the rate of return. In the high developed countries, you will find that, for example, our debt to GDP is still in 50s. But we have countries which are in 90s. They are developed countries in 90s. But the beauty with them is that when they borrow money and they borrow $1, by the end of the cycle, it has earned another $1 or $2. So meaning that they are acquiring debt to generate wealth.
Yeah, in fact, Mr. Kabas, sorry to cut you short there.
Please.
World Bank, there was a World Bank study in 2015, 2019. It showed that that for every $1 we borrow, we generate a return on investment is 0.75. So we are losing. The return on investment is negative. So how do we get out of it?
In fact, then if we also marry that one with the Mbechi Commission report, which even suggested that for the money that we get in, for the $1 we get in, we lose
In the outflow of resources.
the outflow illicit financial outflows. So we have a situation where our human resource management needs to be fixed vis-a-vis the kind of work that we need to have. And this is where, again, politics come in. Because some people look at these budgets as means of employing people. Other people and other countries look at these budgets as ways of enhancing production and creating wealth for the same wealth and creation, rather, and production to create jobs. For us, we want to use the national budget to create jobs. Other people want to use the national budget to make investments that can create jobs in the economy. And that is where we are getting it wrong. Our focus should be investing in strategic areas that will generate jobs, not us collecting money from Uganda Revenue Authority to create jobs in the public service.
All right. Now, gentlemen and lady, let's try to look at the best way forward. Some lessons that we need actually to take from the current the budgeting process and how we can improve going forward. I will begin with you, Ms. Jen Nalunga, before we get the feedback from the listeners.
Maybe going forward, the lessons we need to learn. You look at, for example, there are resources which have gone to PDM, 1 trillion, and I think even last year it was 1 trillion again to PDM. But I don't know, Mr. Kaptavas, whether you Kenneth have looked at how the 1 trillion of PDM was utilized, whether that's the way to go, you know. So we are putting money in places where we don't know whether really it's generating growing the economy to generate more.
Well, we seem
jobs.
to be more interested in the next budget. We don't do analysis of how the budget performed.
Previous budget. And we also, and Mr. Katabas has raised a very critical issue that our budget is for injecting money directly, throwing money at people, and we don't know whether that money will generate more money. Because, for example, you look at the PDM 1 trillion, the Juakali enterprise, I don't know what it is, 3 billion. You look at the agricultural credit facility, 50 billion. We need to know, how have these facilities operated? Is this the best way to use our money? So the whole issue of analysis and evaluating where we put our money last year and how it has performed, for me, I think it's important, as it will show us where we should be putting our money.
So you want to see analysis of the budget performance before we decide the next budget.
The next budget, where we should be putting our money. Then I think another issue is the issue of planning. Because I think as a country we have failed to plan. When you look at government way back, we used to have, and I have been calling about this Ministry of Planning, an independent Ministry of Planning. You look at countries which have developed, they plan. And plan without looking at the politicking, the politics, where to put the money, who shouldn't be merged with who, an independent planning ministry to be able to say this is the way forward. But maybe we need a political will for us to be able to do whatever, all these things which we are saying. We need a political will, because it will require a fundamental departure of where we are and what the way we do things. And sometimes we talk and then we say, really, do we have the political will? You know, because it's like doing surgery.
All right.
And I don't know whether the president has that strong heart to be able to do that surgery, but we need the surgery. And if we don't do it, we are just going to continue in circles. The budget has gone up, it's 100. Where is it going? It has gone where? Why don't they increase here and there? And we are going to continue like that.
All right. Let's hear from Mr. Katabazi. The lessons and the best way forward, even as we plan for the next budget cycle.
I think we need to, in my view, our investment in physical infrastructure development is spot on. There's an allocation to it. What we need to do is to ensure that maintenance is also provided for. You can put up a very, very beautiful road, put up a very beautiful hospital, but once it is not properly maintained, the cost again of revamping it is, in most cases, even times 2 the original cost. So we need to cut costs by ensuring that once we put in place a very, very good physical infrastructure, be it a road, we provide resources for. Lastly, correspondingly, we need to invest in people. We already have numbers which tell a very different story. More than 21% of our people are in abject poverty. So what are we linking the budget to the poverty numbers that are rising?
PDM.
If we are not, yes, PDM is a general project. It's the way it is in Karaare, it's the same way it is in Karamoja. But you are being told that you are having over 40% of the poverty number of people falling into poverty in Karamoja. You're having 27% in Kigezi, people who are 12% in the previous 5 years. Now it is 27%, more than double, falling into poverty. What specific interventions are you putting in place to respond to these specific areas where poverty numbers are hitting the roof? So for me, it calls therefore for investment in human capital development. Human capital development, both investing to sustain the quality of life for Ugandans, but also to caution them against vulnerabilities that normally arise. Like old age is a very significant disability that comes, disabilities that come through our occupations, accidents, and the rest. But then also the inability occasioned by age, old age, and also young age, because you know the studies normally show that over 30% of our children are stunted. So what mechanisms are we going to put in place to ensure that that we have a future that is composed of people who are well brought up, people who can able to compete at both national and international level? Of course, you know, if you're stunted, if 30% of your workforce is going to come from the people who are stunted, you're very sure that the productivity is not going to be as much. So for me, our budget should be looking at some of those investment areas and being able to propel or project this country for future investments, or rather for future opportunities. And you can already see that the future investments are not the ones that we are talking about, of getting a way to dig. Technology is advancing. But now, if 30% of your population are stunted, are they likely now to be the quality that will fit into the future of technology? Possibly not, because they will not have gone to school, or if they do, they will possibly struggle. We are talking about skilling. You can skill a mind that is already set for that. So if you are stunted and you have limited understanding, even the skilling level.
So you are talking about stuntiness mentally.
Yes, it is. Yes,
physically.
Yes, stuntedness at a young age impairs the mental capacity to participate in onward processes. And for me, I think this should be a very critical area of investment. The other one, of course, which possibly should be my last, would be about managing the debt crisis that we're heading into. Already now, as you have seen, we are going to be borrowing to pay debt. So what happens if the oil revenues do not come in as we are anticipating? What will happen? So we need to manage the issue of debt, but debt management must be linked to budgeting. Of course, if you are misbehaving in parliament here and there on allocation, it means that we are going to do misallocations and getting money from priority areas to non-priority areas, requiring now more money to bridge the gap this other side and calling for more debts. So budget discipline is number one key in this question. And this is where I would want the leaders of this country to manage the issue of budgeting, but also of debating. For example, now the arresting of members of parliament and the focus on is about now budgeting. Then we also need to see very serious actions on what? On spending. So that if we have budgeted very well with discipline, then we are spending very well discipline. I'm very, very, very sure that is the best way to manage even our debt dilemma that we are faced right now.
All right, we have a comment coming in from James Kizito, who says, where is the 73 trillion shillings sum coming from? He is wondering how the budget actually increased to that amount, 72 trillion shillings. And then we have another comment from Peter Musisi, who says, budgeting in Uganda is now a ritual with corruption embedded in it. Then we have another comment. How do we ensure that budget performs better compared to the past one? That's a comment from James. And then we have another comment coming in from Richard Cholaba, who says that the debt situation will worsen if we continue borrowing for non-productive areas. Well, those are some of the few comments that we have been able to get in, coming in from the listeners that are actually following this discussion. So let's sum up this discussion. And what is your anticipation tomorrow, Mr. Nalunga, even as the president articulates the figures and the policies therein?
My anticipation, what I hope, what I wish, is that resources should be put on those strategic areas. There are areas.
And then Jimmy from Agago actually says he agrees with you. We don't need all those MPs, but 50 is a bit small. Maybe we should have one MP per district, and all should come on merit. There should not be any affirmative action for MPs. Then we have another comment. Kenneth, thank you for the program. I would like to agree with the previous speaker that the size of parliament should be reduced by electing 2 MPs per district to reduce public expenditure and corruption. That's John Okuni, who is listening in from here in Kampala.
Good. Okay. So what do I expect tomorrow? And I thank all those views coming in, and I hope, Kenneth, you could, anyway, thank you for providing a platform for citizens to be able to present their views. They are what we call some cash cows, which I hope the budget will speak to, areas which we can be able to have some quick gains. For example, issues like coffee, putting more resources towards coffee. Mr. Kataba has raised the issue of digital and technology. The word
knowledge-based economy.
Yes, the word is going digital, it's going green. And when it comes to coffee, we have to be aware that our coffee will depend on doing certain things which EU wants to ensure that we need to show them quality, but
value
also
addition.
Quality, but also showing that we are not hurting the environment.
Okay.
And we need to do that. And UCDA, we need resources to be able to do that. So there are things which we need to do. Coffee is very critical. The issues of market access. It's good that in the budget they are talking about having commercial attaches in the key embassies. But markets means that we need to be able to produce.
All right.
Produce to that quality, to that quantity.
All right.
So again, for me, I would be happy if there is more resources in production, in agriculture, in agro-industrialization and marketing.
Very quickly, Mr. Katabazi, your closing remarks as we come to the end
My
of the show.
expectation, of course, the president asked members of parliament on whether they should forgive these ones or said, "Do you want blood?" And people nodded in approval. So I'm sure he's going to be
bloody.
He's going to be feeling chest thumping that he has started taking action. And for me, that would be a very good thing if he actually becomes more pronounced on the issue of dealing with budgeting discipline, especially within Parliament.
All right, I'm afraid time is not our best allies. We'll be waiting to listen to the budget speech tomorrow, but also do an analysis of the speech, the things that the president will articulate on, that is tomorrow on Spectrum 7 to 8 p.m. same time. Up next, we have the news in English with Miss Josephine Dagano. Thereafter, we'll have the Soul Train with BP Junior.